Hi.
Erika.
Can you see me?
I cannot see you.
Oh, you can't see me.
I can't.
Okay, now you can. Is it okay now?
I can see you.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you? I'm sorry. I thought that I've been on Skype, but it wasn't like signed on or something.
Can you please tell my co-host that it's your fault and not my fault? Because he was,
Yes.
for the last 10 minutes, he was just insulting me to say you screwed up again, you know.
I'm sorry. It's my fault. I don't know how to do Skype very well, so I apologize.
That's fine. Thank you. Apologies accepted, then. Norma, you still here?
I'm still sweet a chicken sandwich, so
Hi,
I'm very
Norma.
happy.
Hi, Erika.
I'm sorry about that.
Oh, it's not. Don't worry.
Okay.
I thought for a moment that I'd wasted my 13 minutes of research for this interview, and you weren't going to be able to make it. I'm lying. I'm lying. There's no way I spent 13 minutes researching the
Jesus
interview.
Christ! But I would have said that the first time, but you spent so much time on this actually. But actually, I spent the entire day.
Can we start recording, by the way?
Yeah, I've
Can we start
started
recording?
from my
Okay.
end. Can you start from your hand?
I am.
Oh, good. We are good. Okay, so I spent the entire day trying to think how can we not try to screw this interview or this conversation with all of you, because we never did 4 people at the same time. We never did it, right? So, and obviously we are not professionals, and you'll realize this very quickly. We are not very, we are far from being professional. So I'm stressed. I need to express my feelings right now. I'm stressed. I'm scared. Right, and I'm holding my beer with 2 hands right now, and I hope that the alcohol will play a huge role in this interview. Okay.
It's like 8:30. It's 8:40 in the morning where I am, so I have not yet. Yeah.
It is with him too. He just likes to start drinking very early. Yeah.
Okay.
This is the progression through the day. You're on coffee. I'm on water because it's nearly midday here, and he's on beer because it's like
8:45 p.m. in Dubai.
in the evening.
Okay,
Yeah.
in the evening for me. Okay,
We'll give him a pass.
So I'm glad because it's an experiment again. We never did 4 people at the same time. We are recording through Skype, and I'm praying as well that Skype will hold this conversation and we'll be able to have a nice recording from this. So I'm happy because we will discuss about one of my favorite topic, which is death, right? So yesterday, I have to tell you, we had another podcast that we were recording, and it was about my other favorite subject, which is happiness. And we had this happiness consultant, which is an expert on happiness in the workplace, right? And Tim mentioned that I'm interested by 2 subjects only by death and by happiness. And he presented these 2 topics very far apart. He said, okay, it's very opposed. And actually, I don't think that these 2 topics are opposed at all, because I think they're very, very well linked. It's all about life, actually. It's all about living this better life. So, okay, I don't know where I'm going with this big, long introduction.
No, you've lost it completely, haven't you? You're just on an ego trip. It's all about you. I can't even remember saying that, but I'm sure it's like improv, isn't it? I can't say no, or I didn't say that. I've got to go with it now and say yes. I said happiness and death are farther apart. Do you want to introduce the 2 people who've been good enough to since they're your guests, Olivier?
Erika and Norma, at some stage you'll be able to talk at some stage, but we have an ego complex.
Half an hour in.
But so sorry about that. So I'm happy because we have Erika, who is a journalist, right? Journalist and writer. And you wrote this book, which is called The Death Class, a true story about life. And what you, write about is about Dr. Norma Bowe. Am I pronouncing this correctly?
Yes, you are.
Oh, shit, I did this correctly. By the way, are you okay with swearings? Can we swear?
I am very okay with swearing.
Fuck yes.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to be very disappointed about 10 minutes into this interview.
It will be fucking boring otherwise, right? So I've just finished this book 3 days ago, and it's obviously Tim didn't read it, so he will try to improvise, I guess. Obviously,
I've read some Amazon reviews, so I feel like I know the book now.
Yeah, okay. So really, it's all about this title. Really, it's about this deaf class, and it's. I was amazed that we have that. I'm French, right? And in France, we don't have that. We don't have class about deaf. And your class, Norma, it's called Deaf in Perspective, right?
That's correct, yeah.
And you teach in Kean University. See, I have done some research here. You teach in Kean University, New Jersey, and you have a wait list for this class, for your class, for about 3 years, right? 3 years waiting list.
That's correct, yeah.
So it's extremely popular. It's extremely
Yes.
popular, right?
Is there an irony there that some of the people will be dead before they get on the course? just wonder if
Well,
this
we
is
hope not,
related.
but
Yeah.
So Norma, let's okay. Let me try this. Imagine I'm a new student, and I would like to learn about this class. What can I expect going to this class, to your class?
well, this is a very different kind of undergraduate class. I tell the students that it's more like a seminar, and you can expect to sit in a group with other people and share your story and listen to other people's story. You're going to have an opportunity to talk about your own grief. You're going to have an amazing opportunity to be out in the field in places like a cemetery, a hospice, a funeral home, a prison, an autopsy. So you're going to see death up close and personal. And you are going to bond with the rest of your group, and you will remember this course for the rest of your life.
Wow. Okay. Are you sold, Tim?
Yeah. I start crying at the 6 element practice meditation process because it's all about death. But anyway,
Okay.
carry on. I was about to say, no, I won't even go there. So that what for me as an outsider, it's a little bit like I get into conversations about people about positive psychology and the reason, the most of sort of medicine, most of psychology, and that it looks at what's wrong and then tries to put it right. Whereas positive psychology decided to look at what was working and replicate it. This kind of like is not in either of those boxes, is it? It's just something so unique. Certainly in the West. I mean, I think this is probably more acceptable in the East. What gave you the idea, Norma? What decided, I'm going to do a class on death? I mean, not many people have that thought.
So I took the course over. It was already on the books at Kean University. I took it from someone who was retiring.
Yeah.
And I looked at the syllabus, I looked at the course outline, and I kind of threw it in the garbage because it was a lot of philosophy, sociology, like Durkheim's theory on suicide. It was just a lot of theoretical kinds of didactic lecture type course. And I really wanted to make it interactive. I wanted the students to walk away feeling like they really learned something that they could take into the rest of their lives. I wanted it to be experiential. I really believe in experiential learning. And so I redid the course to include the field trips and to include the bereavement group aspect of the class. And, the course really, it is called Death in Perspective. But by the end of the class, most of the students say it's life in perspective.
Actually, Erika, you followed this class, right? You did. You part of this. You're a journalist, but I believe I read this about you. You like to immerse yourself, when you do your articles. So you followed this class yourself. So how was it for you?
So I was. Well, I wrote an article about the class first for the LA Times, and I learned about the course when I was in New York. I was writing from New York on all kinds of big breaking news stories and death-related stories, and I came across her class because a student had written about it. And so I visited, and I stayed for, I think a couple weeks or maybe even a couple months first, just observing the class and, interviewing people. And then I just kept on staying for longer. And I took the class, and that was partly Norma's idea because she didn't want me just lurking around and not participating. So, and I think she also recognized that, journalists often have to go right into the middle of very intense death situations, whether it's 9/11 or plane crashes or school shootings, which I did that's the kind of work I often did. And so I think she recognized that it would be something that perhaps I would get something out of the class as well. So it was, I think it was a life-changing experience, definitely, to take the course. Of course, I took the course in a more intense way because I was around longer than even a semester. So the whole process for me was, I think, transformative.
And in what way? We hear things like that, life-changing a lot by people. But what practically changed?
I think going into it, I had a lot of anxieties about death. I had death anxiety, is I guess what it's called. And that just, again, came from being in the moment, constantly being in the worst moment of people's lives, when there's a school shooting, I'm the person I was the person who was going to talk to the family the day of or the day after. Or I was in the hospital waiting for drive-by shooting victims to come out of surgery, and as their families realized that they weren't going to come out alive. Or I was in, walking through the 9/11 pit with a mother who lost her child in the Twin Towers. Or on and I could probably go on forever. But, that takes its toll, and I don't think that we talk about that as journalists. I think, journalists just do their jobs like cops do their jobs and nurses do their jobs. And so for me, I had death anxiety because I knew that dying was a reality that, it could happen, and it could happen violently in any day at any time. And you won't expect it. And it doesn't matter how old you are or anything like that. Coming out of the class, though, it's not as if I at all would like to die anytime soon. I don't think anybody would say that. And it's not as if I don't still realize it's the most, it's a horrible thing to encounter, especially if you lose somebody, a child or somebody young. I mean, it's just hard for anybody. And I think Norma could talk about that as well. But I just don't live in that fear every day, and like I used to. I think I really used to think, anything could happen. It was just a heightened anxiety. And I think like Caitlin in the book captured that a lot, because I think I actually identified with her fears in a lot of ways. And she was a student of Norma's who had death anxiety, among other things.
Actually, it's one of my questions, because all this, what you have is a collection of stories, right? It's personal stories more than what happens in the class. It's really about this personal stories about Caitlin, about Jonathan, about Israel, this gang member. So all these very personal, individual stories. And when you read these stories, is just like, God, it's not possible. It's you think that all these stories come out of the movies, but no, this is real. It's about abuse. It's about suicide. It's about it's very violent over there. And these people come with all this anxiety, all these issues, personal issues, and you wouldn't think that the last thing that we want to go is into this death class, basically, because they suffered so much with all these troubles that they had. But actually, by going in your class, Norma, they something happened, right? They get out of it. So can you explain this process, actually?
Sure. And I just want to point out that Erika did such a beautiful job layering all those stories, my story, the student stories, and then, giving us these glimpses into the class. And so she was there for that specific time. But I'm going to tell you that last semester, I had a brand new room full of students. I had a girl whose mother had just died of liver cancer, sitting next to a guy whose mother had died of lung cancer, sitting next to another young man whose father had died in a train accident, next to a girl whose father died in the Twin Towers, but her mother didn't tell her that he was dead for 3 months. So she was 7 years old and didn't know her father had died. Next to a girl whose mother went missing last summer and was found 3 days later. She had committed suicide, sitting next to another girl who struggles every day to be alive. So at any point coming into the class, you would hear stories like that. And I think young people do carry a lot of grief. 3/4 of my class raise their hand when I ask them if they know of anyone who's been murdered. And half the class raises their hand when I ask if they know anyone who's committed suicide.
No.
And accidents, the whole class raises their hand when I say, how many of you know someone who's been in an accident? And so we carry a lot of grief. We don't talk about it. There's no place that seems to be the acceptable place to do that. And the class really offers a place to lay it down and to more or less come up with a life map. These things happen to us. There's a lot of research. There's a body of research out there. You mentioned some of it with positive psychology, but it is a way of looking at things, either looking at things that make us sick or looking at things that make us well. There's a whole field of psychoneuroimmunology, which talks about how our central nervous system will interpret what we're thinking and can affect our immune system. So we're learning a lot more about that. And I think it's so important to have a place to grieve. I've just started doing grief workshops for adults now because, people are asking me, all sorts of people are asking me, how do I get into the class? And it's just not feasible to have all these folks taking the course. But we need places to talk about death.
Agree. And in our society, we have such denial of death. It's something that we don't talk about and we don't want to talk about. And if you try to bring this subject, you just have this big, why would you bring this? You shouldn't thought about it. You shouldn't think about that. It's something that it's seen as something wrong.
Yes.
Which to me, actually, and this stories proves that, is by going there and looking and searching, you can come out of it, right? And and this is what my take is. Am I correct to say that?
I would agree with you. Yeah. I think in order to live your full life and to understand that your life is a precious gift, Mary Oliver is my favorite poet, and she says, we have this one wild and precious life. But in order to actually appreciate it, enjoy it, and live it the way it should be lived, I think you have to face your own mortality and not be in such a denial. And we don't talk about any of this until the health problems come knocking at the door. And even then we don't talk about it. Look at everything in the news recently, too, about just keeping people alive on machines. And then that brave young woman in Oregon who moved there so she could die with dignity. I mean, these are conversations that we really need to have as a society, I think.
Agree.
Yeah, you try. My wife won't even let me show her how to do the house accounts.
Oh my goodness!
That's that. And she's an oncology nurse, but she's just doing a doctorate in oncology. But she just won't consider it. I couldn't even. Her father's 80. You just can't even mention the fact that because she's replicated her mother, because her mother won't. It's a similar situation. If anything happens to him, God knows how they're going to survive. I mean, he's very fit and healthy for an 80-year-old at the moment. But it's just ridiculous. I'm like, look, you don't even know how to get into one password to get the fucking bank passwords out. I mean, this is ridiculous. And it's just like, there's always something, it's too busy. And you're right, you mentioned the word, it is denial, isn't it? If it's just like, let's shut it off and it doesn't exist. It's like the kid putting eyes behind the hands, isn't it? It doesn't, it's just like, I don't exist anymore. This is a podcast, so that was a really stupid
things
example.
To do,
Yeah, stupid things to do in a podcast. And mine is
So
I'm doing my best, Marceau.
So for the listener, Tim was covering his face, by the way. This is what I was doing. So anyway, sorry, and you cannot see him, Norma, as well. But I had a question, by the way, and I'd forgotten it. And I think this is because of a beer. I forgot.
Yeah, did you keep a pad? You see this?
Oh, you're professional.
We've been doing this. Is the
writing
15th fucking podcast. Look, I'm making notes because my memory sucks. Norma, there's a 3-year waiting list. And by the way, you're the first person to use didactic on our podcast, so you will be getting a gold star in the mail. So thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for forcing me to open my thesaurus. So there's a 3-year waiting list. So what stops? I hear this. I can remember who was the guy, the Israeli guy that did the course on happiness at one of the Ivy League colleges, and immediately it sold out. And he reminded me a little bit of Richard Feynman, the quantum mechanics guy who won the Nobel Prize, where he'd have people trying to get into his class that weren't even doing physics, just because it was just such a brilliant class, etc. So here you've got this class at a 3-year waiting list. Wouldn't you have thought there'd be other schools thinking, wow, that's a great idea, let's replicate it?
There are a lot of death and dying classes in colleges across the country. I think what makes my course a little different is the field trips.
Okay, so all right, so let me change the question then. What stops them, changing that round and sort of grabbing the bull by the horns like you have? And because it's all right to talk about it when you're very distant and very sort of, disassociated from it. It's another thing to walk onto a cancer ward, So I've got a condition called hemochromatosis, which means I have to have hemochromatosis, which means I have to have a pint of blood. But that's a study of hemas and chromas. I have to have blood taken off, but I have to have it done on a chemo ward. And it's just such a... Actually, I see more smiles often in that day than I do for the rest of the week, which is quite remarkable. I think cancer patients, on the whole, it's not all the case, are often incredibly stoic. But it is that experiential element of it that makes it real, isn't it? You can talk all you want to a 10-year-old about death or whatever, but it doesn't really have any impact until something specific happens. So so do you think there's a fear around other people doing this, that they don't want the people responsible with doing curriculums, I guess, just feel like that it's a step too far, even though it's popular?
I'm sure the other classes are incredible also. I think the difference might be that I worked as a nurse for so many years before becoming a professor. Mm-hmm. And so I not only teach this death and perspective class, but I also teach community mental health and social activism at a graduate level. And so I am always bringing my clinical experience into the classroom, real life experience. And I think in order to fully live, we have to face our mortality. So what better way to do that than to go on the field trips? Mm-hmm. And these field trips aren't all... they're kind of like being on a podcast with you guys, actually. We do a cemetery scavenger hunt. we do and actually a student showed up drunk to class last night. So I'm actually reading that right now.
Yeah, see us with it now, yes.
It can be my friend, I think.
Yes. So, I mean, imagine that we go on a cemetery scavenger hunt. But what we're looking for in the cemetery is true love. So people have to read the epitaphs and you have to actually look for things. And, I think being in the field is so important. And then, because it's unique and because it's different, I think the students go home and tell their families about it. So now the whole family's taking the class and they're all talking about, well, do you want to be cremated? Do you want to be buried? What kind? I had to pick, the students have to go pick their own urns and caskets for when they die at 100. So they'll come back to their family and say, oh, I had to do that. What do you think you might want? And so it broaches the subject, not only just in the classroom, but I think they carry it out of the classroom and bring it into their lives too. And I don't know if I answered your question. I don't remember what the question was.
I wanted to add something to that also because, first of all, I've interviewed a lot of people who are death educators because there there are a lot of death classes all over the country. In fact, there have been a growing number since I think the 50s and the 60s as these conversations open up. But, teachers are all different, professors are all different. And, Norma works very hard to maintain these relationships with places like the prison or the funeral home or, the coroner's office so that she can bring these students in. And I think that in itself is an art to try to maintain relationships with like places like a hospice, and I'm going to bring, 35 students in and every semester. She really has to navigate the politics of all that. But at the same time, research has actually shown, because there's been a body of research on death education classes in America over the years, and research has shown that those classes that do actually do some field work and bring students into the world of death in some way. Maybe some other classes do go to funeral homes, for example. Those particular experiences lessen death anxiety more so than if you're just sitting in a class reading, the latest, medical study about death or literature book or textbook, which is a big difference, I think. So while there are so many death education courses now, and a lot of people do think it's a good idea, I don't think you can just hand it over to any professor or teacher and it won't be the same experience as being in this particular class. And at the same time, is it even a great idea to just have a lot of students who bring in all of these personal issues and just kind of ignore them and deal with the text? I don't know if that's a healthy way. So I think it's a kind of, I think people are still thinking about how they would include those kind of classes in their curriculum, and if it's healthy, I guess.
I have a question for you, actually, Erika, because you just mentioned you had death anxiety, right? And you had to go to a morgue, right? And basically as part of the curriculum and see a corpse and do an autopsy on things like that. And
I do an autopsy.
You had to do an autopsy.
Well, not to do, but attend a.
The thing is with an autopsy, even if you screw it up, what's the worst thing that can happen? I mean, you get a pulse. It's just like, I've killed them again.
Okay, so let me just finish my question, because when I was reading the book, right, just by reading when you describe what happened to your, to the body, like the phases when you die, like the different, your livers and all this stuff that happens, inside your body and till you die. I was almost fainting, I was almost like, oh, Jesus Christ, I was like a real afraid about what I was reading here. And you go there yourself, and you face that. And this is what basically described Tim, the reality of death, So how do you manage that? How do you cope with this, by facing this?
Well, that particular section, if you're talking about the process of death, that was put together by me listening to Norma sit in the middle of a cemetery and do her lecture on the biology of dying. But and then to add to that scene, there was research woven in, into the various statements that she made. So that was, if that's, you might even ask her about the biology of dying, but you're talking about coping with the.
So you see how bad I am as an interviewer.
That's
because,
okay. That's
no, because you
he is.
No, I am.
Don't stop him when he's on a roll, Eric.
I'm just trying
to carry on, mate.
I'm trying to describe that I was just reading it. I was scared, right? And you had death anxiety, and you went to the field. You went to this autopsy or funerals and things which is real over there, and you managed that. You managed to get there and to face the situation yourself, even with your death anxiety. So I was just wondering what put this courage in you to go there, and to face that.
Yeah, well, I think that. Like I said, I was in the middle of death situations all the time, as a journalist. So it's not as if I shut down and can't talk about death or be around it. I had to be around it. And I think death anxiety I don't know if it's necessary. I mean, I think it's different for everybody. I'm sure Norma would say that some people have fears of funeral homes and autopsies. I had actually been in autopsies before, even though it's not like I did it every day. So it was not like that part that was the anxiety. I think it was more of a fear of what is not what you cannot control that took over, because being around that is okay. I could do that, but that's for me. It was more about thinking about the various aspects of death and then bringing it into the conversation with history and psychology and listening to the other people's experiences. And it was a process of just opening up the discussion of death beyond just the horror of it, which I already knew about. That's not new to me. Going beyond the horror of it, and okay, so what do we take from this experience? How do you move on? How do people move on? How do you keep living? How are you supposed to live when we all know we have no control over when we die? That was the question. And I think those are the kind of questions when you discuss them that those are the kind of discussions we don't even want to have, because we don't want to talk about death in the first place. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It answers your question. And basically, you're more courageous than me. That's it. That's all what I'm taking from this.
Well, I'm sure she would love to have you in the class if you guys.
You're French, though.
No, I'm French. Yeah,
it's French. I mean,
that's
their
my nature.
national flag is a white cross and a white background, isn't it? So anyway, we'll not go there. We do abuse every nationality, including the English. So don't worry about that. Norma, do you introduce any form of sort of Eastern? I mentioned before about the meditation, the 6-element practice, which is really meditating on the impermanence of life. Is that something you bring into the classes?
We talk about all of the different practices of the world, sort of more as a lecture. And then I do have a friend in the last couple of semesters, I've had her come in and do a meditation. But I don't really delve into the Eastern practices. I would say I dip a toe into it. The class is only 15 weeks and we have 7 field trips. So it leaves me not enough time to do everything I would love to do. And I'm actually thinking about creating Death in Perspective Part 2 to kind of address.
You could have a death degree. I've got a degree in death. I mean, how cool would that be? You straight away, as a serial killer, you're up and running, aren't you? It's like, it's made for me, or a hitman or something. I don't know, maybe not.
No,
okay.
I'm thinking more like extreme death in perspective, right? We can jump out of airplanes and I'm kidding, water rafting. But there's so much to cover in such a short time. And I want them to be able to do some of their own personal grief work. And so that's really where the focus is.
Do you? So I got sent a book to review about 3 months ago. It's quite interesting. It's so interesting I forgot what it was called. But it was about basically life after death. The whole white light experience and that kind of thing. And it was interesting. But it was sold a little bit as the science behind it, and whereas a lot of doctors were interviewed and asked their opinion, it was still very much apocryphal and sorry, not apocryphal, I beg your pardon, anecdotal, which I suppose it has to be because But I'm interested for with something like that, because obviously life after death gives a lot of hope to a lot of people. So I know people that just are not scared, they've got no death anxiety, through maybe a belief that's false, or maybe it's true, nobody knows because it's just a belief, but I just wonder what your take is on that. Was there even a question? I think there was.
It was.
Yeah, I don't know what happens after we die. I know
that. I was expecting for the expose that we could sell to TMZ.
Shit, we could have had a scoop.
Fucking hell, that would have gone viral on YouTube. Life after death solved. Problem solved.
I've heard a lot of people talk about the light. I've been around people that have been clinically dead for a short time and have been resuscitated. And by a short time, I mean like 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, and they've been resuscitated. And I've had people tell me about the light experience. I also worked with a doctor named Dr. Raymond Moody, who wrote a book called Life After Life. Yeah. And, he went around the whole country interviewing people who had had those clinical death experiences. And then he went around the world, and they're very, very similar, the stories of the light. And so my mind has become wide open to all of these possibilities. I don't pretend to know. And, I've had enough weird experiences myself as a nurse that my mind is wide open about everything.
Mm-hmm. When I read the book, actually, there's one image that came into my mind, and it was like when I'm reading all your stories and what you were doing, Norma, it was, but she's the modern Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, actually, because this is what came into my mind. Because you're also an activist, right? You're an activist, and you want to help. As soon there's a problem or an issue, like you're teaching in prison, you're helping, homeless people, and every time there's an issue, you go there, and you want to save the world or something like that. You have this kind of attitude towards people, So this is admirable, actually. When I was reading all this. So what pushed you to do this? That's a dumb question, by the way. That's a very dumb question, but I couldn't find anything else to say.
No, I think it's very...
He Googled that question.
I actually think it's a really good question, and I'm, trying to see how service work and grief work intersect. I think that doing service work, community service and activism work, really helps people deal with grief. And doing that kind of work, even in honor of someone, is very, very powerful. And we still do all of those things. Our Be the Change group is about to go to University of Miami next week to the Clinton Global Initiative. We were selected because of the work we're doing in Newark around our garden projects, changing the landscape for peace there by taking abandoned lots and turning them into pocket parks. And now we're doing a garden at the Women's Domestic Violence Shelter in Kosovo because we have a Be the Change member deployed with the National Guard there. And we feed the homeless every week. And, the update on the girls that were at the teen homeless shelter, those stories are in the book. We've got 3 of them that are going to graduate from Kean University next year. And we've got 9 altogether that have been to Kean. So, this work has just really enhanced my life. And it gives my life meaning and purpose. And I think people do better, even when bad things happen to them. If you can find some meaning and purpose out of a bad situation, you can really turn that into a moment that can guide your life, and if you're not a victim anymore and you become a survivor, or if you aren't a victim anymore and you're doing something about the problems that you see, people do better. So I'm actually exploring all of this myself because this is something now that's new for me, but there is an intersection between service work and grief work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is just a side note, but I was thinking about this the other day because a colleague of mine, his wife, passed away of breast cancer after a very long battle. And, when you are a colleague or a friend of somebody who's experiencing grief, it's kind of a weird, what are you supposed to do? Like, how do you comfort somebody? And so, of course, I did the very cliched thing of sending flowers. And later, that week, the family sent out a note saying, please, everybody, they were just getting inundated with flowers. And they would prefer that people donate in somebody, for a cause that she believed in and things like that. And it made so much sense. And I was just thinking maybe we should rethink how we, when we see other people who are in grief, flowers maybe is not the answer. Perhaps thinking about how to, these kind of ideas that Norma's talking about, like maybe even specifying that before we die. We don't want a whole bunch of flowers. Maybe we want, maybe you should all do a community service project in our name for something that we really loved. I think that would be a really nice way to deal with the mourning process, because we don't really know how, besides sending flowers and cards and condolences in this country. I think that's a conversation we could think about changing, I guess.
Actually, that's interesting because in the UK, it's really common for people to give money. It's probably. I'm sorry, I'm getting some reverb. I don't know if you can hear it, but 4 out of 5 people when somebody dies will send out requests for donations to a charity rather than for flowers, for that exact reason, that they just get inundated with flowers. Yeah. But I think it's right. It's like you don't know what to say, do you? When somebody says, when somebody tells me, when a client tells me like they had a father or the mother die, at what point do you, when they say 4 years ago or 3 years ago or last week, at what point do you stop saying, oh, I'm really sorry about that? When the reality of it is, it's just, I've had this conversation with people loads of times. If you think in 130 years' time, so we'll be conservative, there isn't one single person on this planet now that will still be living. There will be probably 10 billion, different people that never met any of us. And it's just such a mind-blowing, sobering thought when you think about that. And, we will be forgotten about. Unless you do something pretty substantial, most people are forgotten about, within a century of the death, even by the relatives. But something I did want to say to Norma, come and give food, come and help the homeless in Orlando, Norma, because they passed the law. It's now illegal to feed the homeless in public parks. So those fuckers, honestly, I know. Can you believe it? I am so proud to live in such a progressive city. There's some homeless people. Let's give them some food. And then the week after they passed the law, they had a big thing where homeless people came out and people came out to give them food. And they actually did start arresting homeless and people giving them food and putting them in jail. Can you believe it? Can you believe this? I've killed the mood, haven't I?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but it's on death.
It was
so the mood needed killing. So, Anyway, carry on, Olivier. You googled another question.
I googled a lot of questions to say what is the best question that you can ask about death. But It reminds me about something. What about you, Tim? It's about this. There's a book which is called "The Denial of Death" by Ernest Becker, something like that. And I think the guy is mentioning that we all think about death, even when the people will tell you, no, I'm it's something that I never think about it. It's in our mind, even unconsciously. And because we have this idea, this is what push us to make these heroic, things, just to try to be remembered, right? Try to our name to survive, to do all these things, to push us to, and basically all his theory is all this progress that we made is because of death. We want to survive, we want to be immortal, kind of, Have you heard about this guy?
Norma? Yeah, he's mentioned in the book also. Ernest Becker.
Shit.
He's just let the cat out the bag there. He hasn't really read the book, but he did read the inside back cover.
No, I mean, his ideas have driven a lot of even psychological tests, because he believed that everybody is living with this denial of death, and it influences all of our behavior, and it actually influences behavior like greed and devotion to country or religion. When you're more fearful of death, perhaps you might cling more strongly to these belief systems that make you a part of something like religion, for example, or government. And there's a bunch of psychologists, Sheldon Solomon is one of them, who created a psychological test called terror management theory, which is now, a huge, it's widely tested all over the world. And they actually test people's death anxiety and behavior. So I don't know if you're asking about what we think about Ernest Becker, but I know that idea. I mean, I think his idea that death drives a lot of human behavior. If you just get down to the basics of it, it does make a lot of sense. I mean, people are living in fear or denial of death, and denial is what we've been talking about earlier. I mean, we don't want to talk about it, and so if you suppress it and you don't talk about it openly, and you just deny that you're going to die or that people around you are going to die, and how does that manifest in your daily life and how you live? And maybe Norma can talk about how that might manifest in how we would live if we, I don't know. Do you have ideas on that, or have you, Norma, thought about that?
Yeah. I agree with everything you said, Erika, and I would just like to propose that instead of living our life being fear-driven all the time, why not just be the captain of our own ship? Why not just live this one wild and precious life? Why not, actually live before we die and have more conversations about dying and death, and and hopefully we'll live to be very old. Some of us won't, like I feel so bad about your colleague whose wife died, Erika, and that stuff happens. But I mean, do we really want to waste our time denying this and not have those valuable conversations and not tell each other how much we mean to each other and not do the things we want to do and keep putting off living, until it's too late? I mean, that's what I've seen. I've seen people on their deathbed with so much regret because there's so much unfinished business. And I know for myself, I'm not going to live my life in fear. I made friends with death when I was a young girl, and I didn't know if I'd be alive from one day to the next because I grew up in a very chaotic, violent home. And I'm not going to live my life that way. I'm not going to fear death, and I'm not going to fear, I want to live. I want to live fully.
You're right. I'm going to get onto my track dealer now, and I want to live.
I want to live.
When you asked earlier about the class and the death anxiety that I had, I think that's what I think in a sense it's a choice. It is a choice. Like, you have all the death anxiety, you can let all these thoughts flood your mind all the time. I mean, I had dreams constantly. I mean, I think I had plane crash dreams every week. And I don't know how you can control your dreams, but there is a point where you just have to kind of push those thoughts out, and you know that they're there. They're always going to be there. They're always in the back of your mind. But are you just going to live in those fears and those thoughts, or are you going to just live your life and do, and I think that's the kind of choice that Norma made with her life. And that's the kind of choice that I've had to learn to understand as well, through taking her class and dealing with death anxiety on a smaller level than others might.
Erika, I like what you just did, because I just realized you're a professional journalist, So you just fed up with us to say, oh shit, I will ask the best question myself. And I will.
These buffoons have no clue. I've got a question ready on ISIS here. I mean, come on, I was going to step it up a level.
Thank you, Erika, for elevating the debate. Can you join us, by the way? We have this very unprofessional podcast. Please, we need a professional here.
Yeah, you can take my place.
You guys are doing a good job.
By the way, I have a question for you about this, because
you just didn't want me to shoot off on ISIS, did you?
No, I don't want the ISIS thing. Shut up, man. Fuck you.
But it was about death. It was about death.
After that, but I have another one, because there's this movement. I don't know if you heard about this one, Norma or Erika, which is called transhumanistic movement, right? Have you heard about this one? So it's Ray Kurzweil, who lead this movement, who is a scientist. He's a genius. He's a pure genius, this guy. And he believes that by 2045, we will reach what he calls the singularity, which is basically we will be able to conquer death. We will be able to download ourselves into computers, right? Or into machines, right? And we will be able to repair ourselves. And basically, death is just looked as a disease. So we will conquer death and we'll become immortal. So no more death. This is what, and it's very, it started to be big, this movement, this transhumanistic movement. So what do you think about this movement?
I'm sort of familiar with that movement. I don't think that I'm any kind of expert in that movement. But I would just say it sounds like the same kind of ideas behind the science, that Aubrey de Grey idea of the science of trying to live forever. I think it's all, I can understand why everybody's trying to extend their lives, but again, it sounds like a lot of death denial, that whole Ernest Becker thing. I don't know, Norma, what you might say. I'm not an expert in any of those, but I know enough about him to know that I can hear Ernest Becker like screaming through and telling everybody how this is driven by death, death denial in so many ways. You can spend your life doing this, but we're I don't know. What do you think, Norma?
I don't have a need to live forever. I don't want to be in cryonic suspension or some other realm, we don't do death well. Just look at the TV shows, look at the movie, people turn into vampires, the dead are resurrected. We've got all sorts of shows here in the US that are it's just another reflection of our denial of death. I'm a little bit familiar with the movement. I haven't done a lot of reading about it. They talk about the dangers of technology also. There's that piece, like, what will all of this mean? And I guess I'm not one to say that I should be here forever.
Going to get very busy as well. I've seen the documentary Terminator, and that explains what happens if we, I think it was a documentary, but 2045, come on, that's like going backwards in times. That's like going back to 1980. When I was a kid growing up, everybody was going to live on the moon. I grew up in the 60s. Everybody was going to live on the moon, and we're going to fly space cars, and
we're going to live on Mars now.
Yeah, exactly. Planes don't go any faster now than they did in 1970, yet within going the equivalent to going back to 1980 when I was 18, we're going to be able to, well, you said cryogenically suspended, but
in fear of who gets to have this science, who are the privileged people who get to live forever, and the rest of us just.
Let me tell you this: it won't start in Chad or Rwanda or anywhere like that. It'll be somewhere over. I do want to ask you a question, Barbara. Sorry, go on. You're going to say something. I beg your pardon. I cut you off.
Oh no,
Norma,
go ahead.
Norma, I just called you Barbara. Sorry, Norma. I beg your pardon. I'm on a different interview altogether now. We live in different sort of superstring.
Okay, shut up, man. Go.
Go. So we were talking about there's a culture thing here. So I was listening to this interview the other day, which was really interesting and it was about ISIS. But the guy was saying you can't defeat ISIS because they don't understand ISIS. He said these aren't people that just aren't scared of dying. These are people that are looking forward to dying. And until you can get your head round that mindset, now, I know I've gone really sort of left field on you a little bit now, Norma, or Erika. I'd welcome your opinion on this. And Olivier's turning his nose up, he's checking his phone, he's shuffling his feet, he's whistling, he's like thinking, going. I'm sure he's about to run a finger across his throat. So is there a lot of this societal? In other words, if it seems to me like. The very, very strong, devout religious people, there isn't so much of this death anxiety. Although if you believe in hell, and we've all done enough shit in our lives to know that this ain't going to end well if we believe in hell, really. Find a question in there, Norman. If you could answer it, you'd have done brilliant. Because you're a professor and I'm not. I left school at 15.
I have a very simple answer to this question.
I've got to go. The phone's ringing. Is that what it is?
That too. I in no way want to engage in a conversation about ISIS, and that's really just how I feel about it.
Okay, it wasn't about. I was just talking about I was talking about more of a thing about in terms of a belief thing that there's a lot of. I mentioned the ISIS just because of the interview, but there's a lot of Christian people who very, very strongly believe in, or Hindu people who believe in So there must be whole cultures where death anxiety just doesn't exist. That's what I was trying to say. I wasn't trying to draw your opinion on the war against ISIS.
Yeah, no, I don't even pretend to understand people who think that way, at all. And I think there are lots of good people too that aren't afraid of death. And that's something different than actually, giving your life like that for that kind of a cause. And so I don't have any comment at all about what could be going through people's minds or how they feel about death, or I have nothing to say about
Okay. So, I'm coming with a safety question. Okay, I've heard that your book have been bought. The right of your book have been bought, and you have a TV show. Is it correct?
From what we understand, they're working on a TV show, but they're working on writing a pilot. From what I understand, but I don't know much more about that, unfortunately, because I think what happens is, a lot of the TV world, they try to get shows in and you just never know what's going to happen. So I think it would be really cool if it does happen. But at this point, we're not sure yet. And we're not really even sure where the process is at because they don't communicate very much with us. We're just kind of, I don't know.
Okay, my safety question is a failure.
What's that?
My safety question is a failure, basically.
There's definitely a strong interest from NBC and the producers of Dexter. They are the ones who optioned it and are really into it. So, but that's all. I'm hoping that they meet with Norma and get all her stories that I haven't even been able to get into the book, but I don't think they've gotten to that point yet.
The producer of Dexter. Wow. That's great. Cool.
So anyway, this is the point where we ask where you can get the book from. Would it be Amazon, by any chance?
Yeah, it's definitely on Amazon, and it's in bookstores in the U.S. I don't know Amazon's probably the best bet if you're out of the U.S. It is in several different in a couple of other languages, but I think Amazon is the best bet for people who are.
Is there an audio version? I like audiobooks.
I wish there was. That would be cool, but not yet.
There you go, Norma, record an audio version.
Okay.
Seriously. I mean, they sell big numbers. Audiobooks do. Why are you all mocking me now?
We're not mocking you.
I feel all anxious about dying now because I was mocked just before I died.
I have a former student who's in Dubai. She's teaching at a school there, and I know that she was able to get the book there. So
I got it as well in Dubai via Amazon. So
via Amazon.
Yeah.
Did she get it in a store? Or?
I think I didn't ask her, but Erika, do you remember how they were all like posting their pictures of themselves with their books? Yeah. So she was able to get it there somehow.
I've never had anybody posting pictures of themselves with my books. I've no idea what I'm doing wrong.
Tim, we haven't heard about your books as well.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, that's true. Well, Norma, Erika, I'm sure you never had an interview or conversation like this before, so I won't ask you about what are your thoughts. Please keep this to yourself because I think we will be offended, Tim and me. But it was a pleasure actually to have you here, and it's this book really is very powerful. It sometimes it scared me, but it's I learned a lot. And there's this, actually, I had a question about this Erikson stage theory that you teach as well, but I think maybe it's for another conversation with us. But thank you for being with us, Norma and Erika.
Thank you for having us.
Tim, do you want to say something? Maybe.
No, I just wanted to say thank you as well. I've not read the book, but I am very intrigued now. And when you said then it scared you at points, I would have thought that that's probably the point. If a book like this doesn't scare you at point, at some stage it's not probably having the impact. I might be wrong on that, but yes, you've been wonderful. You've put up with my talking bollocks for an hour and with some answers.
Well, it was fun. Thank you so much for having us.
Very well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Have a good
Take care, guys. Cheers. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.